In this video I'm going to demonstrate the 10 signature Coptic binding. So I'm starting out with 10 signatures that are 4 folios each, 6 inches by 9 inches. First thing I'm going to do is we need to punch holes for sewing, so I'm going to take out the inside of one of the signatures. And I'm going to cut it down to a strip about an inch and a half long. Wide rather, and the length is the same as the signatures, obviously, because I pulled it out of one of the signatures. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to measure a ½ inch from each end and score it and fold it. It's convenient to use your cutting mat for a measuring tool, oftentimes. Now I'm going to take these two ends and I'm going to fold them together with the tabs, these folded in, and fold them together. And that will give me a middle mark. I'm going to fold each side to the edge there, that center mark, and do the same thing over here. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and mark this. So at each fold I'm going to make a mark. Mainly so that you can see it, but in case you need it. Okay. So now what I have is 5 sewing stations, each one equally spaced from each other, and a ½ inch here and a ½ inch there. I'm then going to use that and put it inside this folio that I tore out and open that up right in the gutter, right in that fold. I'm going to make these marks. Okay, so now that I've made those marks, I'm going to take this, what I'm now going to use as a template, and put it inside of each signature and line it up with the top and the bottom. And then take my awl and punch each hole. On this sewing, you don't want to punch too deep because the spine will be exposed in this sewing. So you want to keep your holes fairly small. I prepared 10 signatures that I'll be sewing. The next thing I'm going to do while I have these signatures out is use one of the signatures to measure for the cover board. So there's going to be a front board and a back board. And I want the cover to be the width of the signature plus 2 board thicknesses. So using my 2 board thickness template and adding 2 board thicknesses here and adding 4 board thicknesses here. So I'm going to take a 3 plus a 1. 4 signatures here. And luckily that's about right where it is. So I'm just going to leave that as it is. Maybe take off just a little bit. And then I'm going to, grain direction is running this way. And it's already marked. And I'm going to go ahead and cut those 2 covers. So again, I'm aligning the mark that I just made with the edge, lining this on the horizontal line, and then looking at these vertical spaces here and seeing that they're all the same. So it's a visual check. And then cut that. And you know, I think I'm going to just leave that. It's so close, but I might as well just leave it and not make another cut. So Now I'm going to make another one the same size. So this is the front cover and the back cover. And I'm going to double check that to make sure that they're exactly the same, which they are in height and in width. So again, the measurement of that is the height of the signature plus 4 board thicknesses and the width of the signature plus 2 board thicknesses. I'm going to set those aside. I'm going to take the paste paper that I'm going to use so that I can cover these boards. And I think I'm going to start here about in the middle because that's where I like the paste paper the most. So I'm going to go ahead and glue. What I'm going to end up with is about a 3/4 inch square all the way around. So keeping that in mind. Brush. Get this glued up. And I'm working fairly quickly so that I can have wet glue down when it's time to put it down. And again, as always, I want a thin, even layer of the PVA adhesive. I'm going to set that aside. Side. Set that down and line that up so I have about a 3/4 inch square there. If you need to move it in because you like the paste paper better in another spot, that's fine also. Burnish this. Make sure that it's completely flat. Then I'm going to cut my 3/4 inch square all the way around. So that's 3/4 of an inch all the way around. I'm going to take my 1 board thickness template and mark all the way around at each corner. So my cut will be a 45-degree angle. That's a little bit more than 1 board thickness away from the corner. So those are the marks that I made. And then I'm going to cut each one. So you can cut this with your X-Acto knife, or you can use scissors to cut it. I think it's a little better with scissors, just a little quicker probably. piece of waste paper. And glue these up. You can do them one side at a time, or you can do all four sides at once. But if you do it that way, you need to be careful and you need to be a little bit speedy. So I have my brush with glue on it, and not too much. Again, you want a thin, even layer all the way around. So I have that down. Pull this apart. And I'm going to move this for a second. Set that down. Set this side down. Make sure that it's flat against the edge of the board. Push it down. Do the opposite side. Tuck in these corners. Tuck in these corners. All right, then I'm going to burnish all of that. And then I'm going to just kind of tap each corner. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the next board. Just check my piece paper again, make sure I have a piece that I like. I'm going to put it about right there. About 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to burnish that flat. And I'm cutting a 3/4 inch square all the way around. And all this is going to be folded over. So I pretty much know what 3/4 of an inch looks like. I'm kind of winging it here because nobody will see this side of it. Perfectly okay to measure it exactly as well. And then 1 board thickness away at each corner. Mark that. Mark that. I'm cutting just outside that pencil line. so that I have just a touch more than one more thickness. Move that aside. Get my waste paper. Being careful not to set it in the glue that's already there. I'm going to set it on the opposite side of the waste paper. And glue down on each side. I kind of start out with a somewhat full brush, and then I lay it on one side, and then the next, and then I spread it out. Side. And opposite sides. Making sure that it's tight against that board edge. Tuck my corners. And then do those sides. And make sure that it's completely against the edges here, and burnish those flat. Tap my edges. And my covers are set to go. Now I'm going to demonstrate the sewing for the Coptic binding. As usual, I'm sitting perpendicular to my workspace. I have my signatures stacked up and aligned along with my boards. I'm going to set them so that the spine is facing away from me. I'm going to take the board and flip it so that the edge is going to be a little bit away from the table for now because I'm working in and out. I'm going to start out with my waxed thread with a knotless knot on a straight needle. And so I'm going to start the sewing by starting from the top, going out the bottom, and I'm going to pull it through until I have about 2 inches. So about 2 inches, and I'm going to secure that with a piece of tape. Okay, so that's secure now. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go right up into the hole I just came out of. And you want to do your best not to stab through the thread that you've already pulled through. And I'm going to pull that until I have a small loop. That's maybe about 3/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to go out the next hole. And I'm going to pull that snug. I want to make sure that I don't pull that loop out. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go back into the same hole and pull it through until I have a loop about 3/4 of an inch long, and then go out the next hole. And go back into that same hole. Be careful not to stab your thread. If you stab your thread, you want to undo that, and because it will really screw up the sewing if you don't redo it. Okay, out the next hole, and leaving about a 3/4 loop there, and then out the last hole. So already you can see that the thread is starting to want to twist. So I'm going to make sure that as I pull this taut, that it doesn't twist. So I just kind of guide it, and I can pull that a little more snug. And then I'm going to pull this through. Now when that starts to happen, what I usually do is just kind of hold my thread, let the needle dangle, and just kind of bring it down to the needle so that it untwists if it needs to untwist. Okay. So once I'm at the end here, what I'm going to do is I came out from the top to the bottom, and I'm going to go into the top again. So I'm just kind of looping around the board. Okay, that just kind of secures it right there. And I have my 3 loops. So again, started by the top, going out, coming back in, leaving a loop, and you do that all the way through until you get to the last hole. And now that I've done that, I'm ready to put on my first signature. Now the signature itself, I'm going to bring right to the edge of the board. So I'm going to line it up over my holes, but I'm going to bring it all the way to the edge of the board. And then I'm going to set a weight down inside of it. And I'm just going to check my squares. And my square should be about the same here as there. Okay. So now I'm going to go into the signature above. Make my holes a little bit bigger here. Okay. So directly into the hole above. And out the next hole. Okay, and pull that snug. Now I'm going to go up through that loop. So my thread came out, I'm going to go up through the loop and kind of let that hang. Now if I pull this thread on one side, it will shorten this. If I pull it on the other side, it will shorten this. So if I pull it there, it makes that loop smaller. If I pull it here, then it makes that loop smaller. I'm going to pull it until it's pretty tight. And then I'm going to take my thread here, and just pull that until the knot is right on the edge. Okay. And then I'm going to go back into the hole of the signature. Again, make sure that you don't stab your thread. And then out the next loop, the next hole. Okay, pull that snug. And then I'm going to go up through that loop and kind of let my thread hang. Find the side, just pull gently to find the side that shortens that loop. And I'm going to pull on that side. So these loops keep getting bigger and bigger. Okay, and pull that until I meet resistance, and then just pull that until that little knot is right on the edge of the board. After I've done that, then I can go back into that hole, being careful not to stab through the thread. Come out this hole. And again, I'm going to go up through that loop. Okay, and pull this on the right side, on the correct side, so that that shortens. Okay, and when I meet resistance, I'm going to pull this slightly until that knot is right on the edge of the board. Okay. Then I'm going to go back into the same hole, making sure not to stab my thread. And out this last hole. And when I pull the thread, I'm always pulling in the direction that I'm sewing. And then I'm going to go up through this loop. Okay. And now I need to just hold everything in place. And I'm going to open this up. I'm going to untape my thread here. Okay. And pull that until, so I'm keeping an eye on it here, pull that until it is, that loop meets the edge again. Then, so if you pull it too hard, it's going to pull it all the way through. So don't pull it too hard. Then I'm going to retape that so it's in the right position. Now that little knot, little loop there, is right on the edge of the sewing, the board. Okay. Once I've done that, then, and I've taped that inside, I can go ahead and cut that shorter, but that is taped down. So making sure that everything stays in place that I have so far. So right now, it's still a little iffy. Okay, so now I have that completed, and when I pull that, that little loop is right on the edge there. Okay, now it's time to switch to my curved needle. So I'm going to cut that off and take this and thread my curved needle. So once that's threaded, I'm going to stab through about the last inch. I'm going to make a knotless knot here. Stab through the middle of the thread. Okay. I've stabbed through the middle of the thread. Pull that down a little bit. I'm going to pull this very gently until that comes right down to the eye. And I'm going to straighten these out. So I have very little knot to pull through the holes. Okay. Next thing is, I'm going to add the next signature. Take this, flip it right over, and put it onto the next signature. By the way, I did want to burnish that entire signature there before I add the next one. I line that up so my holes are lined up. I take my weight and I put that inside. Okay. The next thing is I'm going to go directly into the hole above. And I think again I'm going to just reinforce my holes so that they're large enough to get my needle through. I'm going to go directly into the hole above, out the next hole, and this is when my curved needle comes in handy. Watching that so it doesn't tie up into a knot. Okay. That's snug. Okay. Now I go between the board and the first signature, take my curved needle, go to the right, and come out on the left-hand side. Okay. And then just pull that snug. Then I go back into that hole. And come out the next hole. Pull that snug. And hook between the first and second the first signature and the board. And pull that through gently. And go directly back into the signature. Same thing. Hook between the board and the first signature. Make sure there's thread under there. Make sure that you don't get your needle messed up with that thread that's under there. So I try to stay close to the knot when I pull this through. In other words, I stay close to this rather than reach far under with my curved needle. I stay close to the knot when I do this. And then I can go back in and come out the last hole. Now the last hole is a little bit different. I'm still going to hook under from the right hand side around these two threads. Okay. Still staying close to the knot. And this is the same except that on the ends I'm going to go up through that loop. Just makes a nicer pattern there. Okay. So I finished that. And I'm going to burnish that flat, and then take my next signature and open it up to the center, and line up my holes, put my weight down, and I'm going to travel back the other way. Go into the hole above, come out the next hole, pull it snug in the direction that I'm sewing. Now instead of going between the first signature and the cover, I'm going to go between the two signatures below. So between signature 1 and signature 2. I'm on signature 3, I'm going to go between signature 1 and signature 2. So always from the right hand side so that you get this braid pattern. Here I don't pull through, I just pull that snug and then go back into the hole. Pull that snug, same thing, hook between signatures 1 and 2, pull it snug, back into the hole. keeping everything aligned. Pull that snug. Between signatures 1 and 2, always from the right-hand side. Pull that snug. And out the last hole. And here I do the same thing. This time between signatures 1 and 2 from the right-hand side. And then I go up through that loop and pull that snug. Okay. Burnish that flat. Take my next signature, I'm just flipping it over. Open it to the center. Keep everything aligned. Line it up with my holes. And put my weight down. Then I'm going to go into the next hole. Force these again. I'm not going too deep, but I do need to increase the size of my holes a little bit. I'm going to go directly into the signature above. Okay. So I'm starting to run short on thread. So as I said, I cut that long piece of thread into 3 equal sections. So I'm going to go ahead and connect my next thread. And if you leave yourself plenty to work with, so I have maybe 3 inches here, then it makes it a little bit easier because you have stuff to grab onto. So I'm going to take my next piece of thread. And I'm going to tie a square knot. So let me make sure that you can see this. So I'm going to take I have a left thread and a right thread. So I'm going to take my left thread, put it over my right thread. And then just like tying a shoe, I'm going to loop that. So now I have a right thread and a left thread. I'm going to put that right thread over the left thread and pull that. So what you end up with is something that looks like this, which is kind of a square, right? So then I'm going to pull that tight. If it happens to twist while I'm doing that, it's going to end up being a slip knot instead of a square knot. So make sure that you keep that in control. Okay, so back to threading my needle again. That fun part of threading this tiny little hole. And let's see if I can have better luck this time. Okay. So pull that through, another knotless knot, so about an inch or so away from the end. I'm going to stab the thread right through the middle. Okay, like that. Hope you could see that. It'd be off camera. So I pull that until that eye comes right down to the edge. So I have virtually a knotless knot. Okay. So now that I have that, I'm going to come out the next hole. Okay. So now I'm going to hook between signatures 2 and 3. So I'm on signature 4, so I hook between 2 and 3, and always from, I guess, from the right-hand side. I might have been saying left, but always consistently from one side or the other. So I've been going into the right, so I'm always going to go into the right. And then back into the hole. Make sure still that you're not stabbing your thread. Not going in easily, so I'm going to try to figure out why that is. Okay, there we go. And then out the next hole. right-hand side, previous two signatures. Pull that snug. When I see it starting to get ready to coil, I don't let that happen. I pull that through. And then again, I'm going to kind of dangle my needle so that it twists around so I get a little bit straighter. Because this sewing does want to knot up. Back into the same hole. Always at the end, the same thing. Between the two signatures below. Snug. And go up through that loop. And pull that snug. Going from the right-hand side, the two signatures below. Pull it snug. Back into the same hole. Same thing, on the ends, I go up through that loop. Hand side, two signatures below. Pull it snug. Back in. in, so I do the same thing, but go up through that loop. Furnish it so that it's flat. Take the next one, put it to the center, line it up. Side, go up through that loop, close that, furnish my next signature, put it to the center, line it up, straight up and down, head and tail, and go into the next hole. Once again, it's time to change my thread. So I have about that much left. I'm going to leave myself as much as I can. And take that off. Take my next piece of thread. And join that. Again, I'm going to tie a square knot, so I have a right thread and a left thread. I'm going to put the left one over the right one. Tie it like I'm tying a shoe. Then I'm going to take like I'm tying a shoe, and then I'm going to take the right one and put it over the left one. And again, right there, it forms a square. And I'm just going to pull that tight. Again, if I let it twist, it's going to form a slip knot instead of a square knot. So just make sure you keep that in place. Okay, so there's my knot. And now I get to thread it again. Joy. Give that another try. There we go. Another knotless knot. let's not. Come out the next hole. Right hand side around that nut. Pull it snug. Back into the same hole. Next one. The end, I do the same thing. Come in from the right hand side, come out the left, and go up through the loop. Like that. Push it. Now I'm coming out of my last, signature. I wrapped around that knot, and once again I come up through that loop. And I finished my last signature, and now all I need to do is sew on the cover. So the same way, I flip over the cover. It's a little bit fussy. So I'm going to start by going through the top. So I come out, now I'm going to go through the top. Okay. And I'm going to go between signatures, the last two signatures, come out on the right hand side, and go up through that loop. And pull that snug. Then going to go back into the signature. And I'm trying to keep things snug here. So it's actually loosened up a little bit there. I'm going to try to fix that. Okay, perfect. Come out the next hole. And this is very similar to loop under. And the only difference is on this last signature, each time I'm going to go up through the loop. Okay, pull that snug, and then out the next. Just noticing that it needs to be tighter there. I'm kind of adjusting as I'm moving along. The next one. Through. I'm going to have hopefully just enough thread to finish this sewing. And through the loop. It would be terrible if I had to add some, but it's happened before. Well, we'll see what happens. God, I hope not. You know what? I'm actually going to show you. Well, we'll see. This is cutting it so close. And pull that snug. Okay, now finishing it off, I'm going to do exactly what I've been doing up through that loop. Pull that snug. Okay. Okay, let's see if I can handle this. Lost my knotless knot there. Rethread that. Okay, there's no chance of getting my knotless knot back. I'm just going to let that hang through. I'm going to go around one more time and into that last hole. I'm going to move this forward. Hopefully you'll have a little bit more thread left over, and pull that snug. Okay. Good. And I'm just going to go through these and just kind of pull each one tight. Okay. Then I'm going to tape this down as well. end of the sewing. Okay, so this last step is connecting the text block to the boards by gluing the front sheet and the back sheet to the boards themselves. So first thing is I'm going to need a couple of pieces of waste paper, actually 4 pieces, that are 6.5 by 9.5. I'll need 4 pieces, 6.5 by 9.5. And these I'm going to use for waste paper. Okay. So I'm going to take one of my pieces of waste paper. I'm going to open up the book and open up the first page. And I'm going to take my glue and my glue and go ahead and glue up that entire first page. I'm going to take this tape off and I'm going to go ahead and get that placed down. Okay. So I'm gluing up this first page. And just be careful at the spine. You want to come right to the edge of the spine, but don't get any of the glue on the spine itself. And I'm brushing off. I want a thin, even layer. I'm going to pull out this piece of waste paper. When I put it on, I want to just kind of line this up first so I know that the holes are on top of each other and the edge of the board is right on the edge of the paper. And I'm checking out my squares a little bit. Okay. And go ahead and put that down. Open that. Not completely, but I'm going to burnish that flat. It's actually a larger square there than I anticipated, but it's fine. Still looks nice. Okay, here the same thing. I'm going to take this tape off, take a piece of waste paper, slide it in there, and I'm going to glue this one up, put a little bit of glue on top of that cord there, and get this glued up. Okay, again, I'm going right to the edge of the paper, but not going onto the spine itself. Paper out, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pick this, I'm going to try to get the square the same here as it is there, and get the board just to the edge of that top signature, and then let that down. And I'm going to open that up slightly and burnish that flat. And it's okay if that thread's visible, not a worry. Okay, let's see here. So that's done. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put it in the nipping press, really just for 30 seconds, just to make sure that everything's burnished down. And then I'm going to keep it under weight so that everything flattens. I do want to take my clean pieces of waste paper and just tuck one into the front and tuck one into the back. just to absorb any moisture and keep it from getting into the text block itself.